The night I found out the truth about my husband, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at the man I thought I knew, wondering how many lies had been woven into our life together. He promised me love. He promised me forever. But what he gave me was betrayal wrapped in sweet words. And the secret I uncovered, it wasn't just shocking. It was dangerous enough to shatter everything we built. Most women would have confronted him right then, but not me. I chose silence. I chose patience, because I knew the perfect moment would come. The moment when his lies would collapse, and all he'd be left with was regret. This isn't just a story of marriage gone wrong. It's a story of how I turned his betrayal into his punishment, and why, in the end, peace was something he would never know again. When I first met Daniel, he wasn't the kind of man who swept me off my feet in some grand, movie-like gesture. No, he was steady, gentle. His eyes carried a calmness that made me believe he was different from every man I had known before. After a painful past and a string of disappointments, I was ready for stability. I wanted a partner who would stand beside me, not a whirlwind of chaos. Daniel seemed like the answer to a prayer I had whispered for years. He worked as an accountant, responsible, reliable, always with his shirt tucked in just right. My friends used to tease me, saying he was too boring. But I didn't want excitement. I wanted peace, or at least that's what I thought peace looked like. When he smiled at me during those early months, I felt like I could finally exhale. Our wedding wasn't lavish. I didn't care about grand halls or endless flower arrangements. We said our vows in a small church, our hands trembling as we slipped the rings onto each other's fingers. He looked me in the eyes and promised me honesty, love, and partnership, words that echoed in my mind for years afterward, even as they began to unravel. The first cracks were almost invisible. A late night at the office that stretched into dawn. A sudden change of plans with no explanation. Receipts in his wallet that didn't match the stories he told me. But I brushed them aside. I told myself, he works hard. He's under pressure. Don't make something out of nothing. That's what loyalty looked like to me. Giving him the benefit of the doubt. But loyalty has a way of blinding us, doesn't it? One evening, I made his favorite meal, roast chicken with lemon and garlic, the way his mother used to cook it. I waited at the table, candles lit, soft music playing. The clock ticked past 7, then 8, then 9. When he finally walked in, his tie loosened, and his eyes avoiding mine, he muttered something about traffic. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I chose to believe him. It became a pattern. His absences grew longer, his words shorter. Yet every time he wrapped his arms around me, every time he whispered, "You're everything to me," I clung to those words as if they were lifelines, because deep down, I was terrified of what would happen if I let go. Still, there were moments I couldn't ignore. Once, I found a hotel keycard tucked inside his jacket. My chest tightened, but when I asked, he laughed it off. Work trip, they gave us extras. I nodded, but something in me shifted that night. A seed of doubt planted itself in my chest, and though I tried to smother it with trust, it kept growing. Looking back, I realized how carefully he crafted the illusion. He knew when to hold my hand, when to buy me flowers, when to remind me I was loved. He fed me just enough sweetness to keep me silent, even as the bitterness seeped in. And I kept telling myself the same lie. This is marriage. Every couple has struggles. You're overthinking. But I wasn't. Deep inside, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong yet. It started with whispers, the kind that only a woman's intuition can hear. Nothing loud, nothing obvious, just an ache in my chest. A quiet voice that said, "He's hiding something." One Saturday afternoon, Daniel told me he was heading to the office to catch up on reports. But when his phone buzzed on the counter, left behind by mistake, I froze. My heart raced, as though it already knew the truth. His screen lit up with a message. Just one. Same time tonight? Can't wait to see you again. I stared at those words until they blurred through my tears. My hands trembled as I unlocked his phone, half praying it was a misunderstanding. But the messages, they weren't new. They stretched back months. Long, affectionate exchanges with a woman I'd never heard of. Promises of weekends together. Plans I thought he was making with me, shared instead with her. My knees nearly gave out. I sat there on the kitchen floor, phone clutched in my hands, tears rolling freely down my face. The man who promised me honesty, who swore before God and our families that I was his, everything, was living a double life. I thought of the late nights, the hotel keycard, the lies disguised as love. Every puzzle piece I had ignored suddenly locked into place, painting a picture I had been too afraid to see. When he returned home that evening, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I looked at him, really looked. The way he loosened his tie, the way he avoided my eyes as he set his briefcase down, the mask he wore, thinking I couldn't see behind it. My heart burned with anger, but above that, something else grew. Silence. Not weakness, not fear, but silence as a weapon. Over the next weeks, I became an actress in my own life. I smiled when he came home, laughed at his rehearsed jokes, kissed him goodnight. He thought I was still the blind, trusting wife. But every time he lied, I wrote it down. Every excuse, every late night, every slip of the tongue. I gathered his betrayals, like evidence in a case. Only I knew was being built. I also started digging, quietly, carefully. Bank statements he left on the desk, credit card bills he thought I wouldn't notice. And there it was. Dinners at expensive restaurants, charges for hotels, jewelry I never received. My stomach twisted with every line I read, but I forced myself to keep going. One night, while he slept soundly beside me, I sat in the glow of my laptop screen. I traced the money, the dates, the locations. Each detail was a dagger, but I sharpened them instead of turning away. I wasn't just discovering lies. I was arming myself with the truth. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was pretending not to know, waking up every morning beside the man who shattered me, pouring his coffee, ironing his shirts, playing the role of a devoted wife while rage and heartbreak consumed me inside. But I endured it because revenge, real revenge, requires patience. He didn't notice the change in me, or maybe he thought I was too weak, too dependent to ever stand up for myself. And that was his greatest mistake, because while he lived in lies, I was learning the art of silence. And when the silence broke, it wouldn't be with tears. It would be with a reckoning he'd never forget. The hardest part about betrayal isn't the knife. It's pretending not to feel the wound. Every day I played my role with precision. Breakfast on the table, polite questions about his work, a kiss on the cheek before he walked out the door. He believed he was fooling me, but in truth, I was fooling him. I had become a shadow in my own marriage, yes, but a shadow with eyes wide open. My plan didn't come to me all at once. It unfolded slowly, like the petals of a poisonous flower. First, I focused on learning everything he thought I didn't know. I checked our joint accounts carefully, noting every unexplained withdrawal. I followed the trail of receipts he left behind in his rush. I even found an email, poorly deleted, that confirmed he had been using company trips as a cover to see her. At night, when he was asleep, I would stare at the ceiling and imagine the moment he realized everything had slipped out of his control. Not with shouting, not with broken dishes or screaming matches, but with quiet devastation. My revenge would not be noise. It would be silence sharp enough to cut. I began meeting with a lawyer in secret, a woman named Teresa, older, sharp-eyed and brilliant. I walked into her office with a folder full of evidence, and left with something far more powerful, a plan. She explained how to protect myself financially, how to trace assets he thought I couldn't touch, how to secure my future before making a single move. The next step was harder. I had to keep gathering proof. Every dinner date he charged, every suspicious text message, every little crack in his story, I saved them. Screenshots, copies, statements, all tucked away in a folder labeled with one word, freedom. But this wasn't just about money. No, money was part of it, but it wasn't enough. What I wanted was to leave him with the one thing he thought he'd never lose, his peace. So I made myself invisible in ways he didn't even notice. I stopped arguing, stopped questioning. The less I asked, the more careless he became. Soon, he didn't even bother hiding his late nights or fabricating excuses. He believed he had broken me completely. But broken women can be dangerous, can't they? Because once we've endured the worst pain, fear no longer controls us. There were moments I faltered, nights when I sat alone in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, asking myself if I was strong enough. My heart ached with the weight of his lies. The life I thought we had built together, the years I would never get back. But every tear I shed only hardened my resolve. One evening, I tested him. I asked if he wanted to take a small weekend trip together, just the two of us. His eyes darted. His excuse came too quickly. "Work," he muttered. I smiled, nodded, and kissed his cheek. Inside, I added another checkmark to the list of lies. What he didn't realize was that I was already building the stage where his downfall would play out, carefully, patiently, silently. When it was ready, when I had everything in place, I would deliver the one performance of my life he'd never forget. The night I chose to end it was ordinary in every way that mattered. Soft rain, the kettle hissing on the stove, the house smelling faintly of lemon and roast. I made sure it felt ordinary, because ordinariness is what they expect. He liked the comfort of routine. He thrived on it. If I wanted my truth to hit him where it hurt most, I needed him to believe nothing was coming. That silence, my silence, was the last thing he would misread. I dressed quietly, not to impress anyone but to feel myself steady. A simple dark dress, the kind that doesn't shout but holds its own. In the living room, I placed the folder on the coffee table where the light would catch it, not in a dramatic way, but easy to see. A neat stack of everything: bank records, receipts with names, hotel bookings, messages, photos. Each piece labeled, dated, and impossible to dismiss as a mistake. On top, I put the small things that cut the deepest: the hotel keycard folded into an envelope, the little bracelet receipt with a date that matched his supposed late night at the office. I had given Teresa strict instructions: deliver copies to the right places, make sure nothing could be erased overnight. Lawyers know the sound of irreversible paper. I wanted that sound to echo. He walked in after his usual late-night excuse. Coat slung over one shoulder, tie askew like a man who still expected me to fuss. He paused when he saw the folder. For a heartbeat, I watched him try to pass the casualness of the scene. Tea on the table, a book left face down as if I'd been reading, the television off. He exhaled with the tiny, practiced relief of someone who expects little friction left in life. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice thick with the kind of tired that acts like decency. "Yes," I said. And because I wanted him to hear the calm in my voice, I added, "We need to talk about the life you built in the dark." His expression flickered. Confusion, then impatience, then the old confident smile that had gotten him out of missteps before. "Is this another one of your dramatics?" I could have screamed then. I could have thrown the folder across the room and made it messy, loud, something to match the roiling in my chest. Instead, I put a cup of tea beside him because the smallest acts can be lethal. He sank into the sofa, and I sat opposite, knees steady, hands folded. The silence stretched long enough that he shifted, uncomfortable. I opened the folder and slid the top page toward him. The hotel receipt lay there like a confession. His eyes widened the moment they read the date. He glanced back at me, then down again, the practice of denial already forming. "Work trip," he started, reflexive. "Not this time," I said softly. "This time there's a trail." I didn't have to yell. The folder spoke. I had photographs, messages with names and times, transfers into accounts he could never explain, a chain of excuses that matched the little bone-deep betrayals I'd been collecting for months. I watched his jaw tighten. Anger flared in him, raw and sloppy. But there was also the panic of a man who suddenly realizes his scaffolding has been sawed. He stumbled through. He couldn't explain this. That was her from a different year. "You're making this up." Old refrains, worn attempts at reclaiming trust. I'd heard them 1,000 nights before, but now they landed on me like thin paper. I let each lie pass by, cataloging not to retaliate with noise, but to build the time bomb of certainty. The next days were quieter, which surprised me at first. He sulked. He avoided me. He flapped his arms, trying to rearrange truth into something palatable. People think the first move of the betrayed is to cry and storm and show the world. But the most effective thing I could do, having grown up watching my mother survive with dignity, was to let the world discover the truth in its own time. I invited Teresa to write, to file, to prepare letters that couldn't be blanked by a morning apology. She worked while I rebuilt my life. She filed disclosures and wrote demands not from rage, but from law. I sent an anonymous packet to his workplace HR. Every record they needed, every time-stamped proof of deceit and misallocation of funds. The little details that made his pattern undeniable. To his brother, I printed a quiet note and a copy of an email thread that made the lies obvious. Not cruelly, but plainly. He deserves to know. To the accounts department, I sent receipts showing transfers to accounts he hadn't declared. I put the pieces in places they could no longer ignore. When the first call came, a legal voice asking for comment, he answered like a man who had never been trained to think about consequences. His voice was high with astonishment, the way guilt always sounds when it's been unpracticed. Colleagues began to look past him. Friends called to check in, which is often what people say when they're uncomfortable and looking for a way to be useful without confronting the rot. The change was almost imperceptible, then sudden. Invitations thinned. Messages dried up. His calendar, once peppered with social dinners and weekend trips, went blank the day I let the world see. I chose a gathering, neither too ostentatious nor too private. It was his mother's birthday. A small family lunch at their favorite restaurant. The kind of place where people still believe manners can hide pain. He arrived with the practiced smile, and as family settled, I asked softly if I might speak. Everyone turned, the air tilting. They expected perhaps a sentimental toast, a remembrance. They were not ready for what came next. I stood, voice steady, and I told the room stories. Not to shame, but to show what living with secrets had been like. I read receipts and read messages aloud, one by one, and I watched their faces fold in confusion, then horror. Some of them looked at him as if seeing a stranger. His mother's eyes filled first with confusion, then betrayal, then that particular ache mothers carry when they realize they have loved someone who lied. He tried to stop me, whispering, reaching for my hand, saying it's not fair, it's complicated. I held my hand where it rested on the table and let it fall away. The phones came out. People latched onto the proof with the ravenous curiosity of modern life. By the time dessert arrived, there were messages with screenshots and soft exclamations, and his younger sister stood up and walked outside to call someone in private. He sat there, small, as if the floor had shifted beneath him. I did not gloat. I did not revel in the collapse. I simply collected. The calm that comes from knowing the truth has finally settled like dust. He did not lose only friends. He lost his job in days. Employers do not love scandal. And when legal notices and bank audits followed, his world tightened until it was all sharp edges. The accounts we had once thought were ours, joint savings he had hidden, investments I never knew how to find, were traced back, rooted, examined. There were consequences that had nothing to do with just money. Contracts dissolved, partners pulled away, and the pretense of the life he had concocted unraveled thread by thread. Most devastating for him was a quiet thing. At night, when the house went dark, he could no longer find a place in his own head where he felt safe. He had always boasted of control. Control of appearances, control of narratives, control of wounds. The proof he had counted on as insulation became the thing that isolated him. He had to sleep with a phone that now buzzed with subpoenas rather than invitations. He woke to silence instead of warm conversation. Where he had slept like a man content, he now slept like a man being watched by his conscience. I had taken away his peace, and it was worse than taking his money. There were moments when our son, small, soft-eyed, looked at me with questions that broke me open. "Why is Daddy sad?" he asked once, placing a tentative hand on Daniel's shoulder. I sat him down, and, in the simplest words I could find, I told him about truth and safety and the importance of being with people who keep promises. I wanted my boy to know that preserving dignity mattered more than revenge. That is why, even in the unfolding chaos, I kept my son at the center of every decision. I did not want him to grow up fearing the loud collapse of families. I wanted him to learn that justice can be gentle and firm at once. When the legal dust settled, after hearings, after mediation, after quiet negotiations that smelled of paper and polished floors, he was a different man. The court ordered restitution for what he had hidden and put parameters on his access to shared resources. He lost leverage, yes. He also lost the easy companionship of those who had liked his image more than they cared for character. He learned to walk down the street aware that whispering could be about him. He learned that he would have nights when sleep would not come, because the mind, in quiet, can make the loudest accusations. And me? I walked away with a pocket of dignity I had not felt in years. I filed the paperwork Teresa had prepared to secure what I needed to live with peace. I set up the accounts and moved slowly into a life that was not defined by his shadow. I took my son to the park and watched him run with the reckless joy of childhood, and felt, for the first time in a long while, the simplicity of breath returning. I took the small velvet box of jewelry he had meant to give me one day, never given, and placed it in a drawer, not because I wanted the items, but because leaving them behind would have been to leave myself behind too. The revenge I delivered was not spectacle. It was the steady unspooling of truth, the placing of evidence where it could not be ignored, and the refusal to be baited into noise. He was left with what money cannot replace: sleepless nights, the knowledge that he had lost the trust of the people who once shaped his life, the understanding that his lies had become the architecture of his loneliness. That, to me, was enough. If there is a lesson I want anyone who watches this to carry, it is this: silence can be a strategy when it is paired with preparation. There is no virtue in shouting your sufferings into the wind. There is power in gathering truth and presenting it with calm. You do not need to become someone cruel to reclaim your life. You need only be steady, prepare the proof, place it where it will speak, and let the lies dismantle themselves beneath the weight of their exposure. If this story moved you, if it struck a chord or rekindled a quiet courage inside, please like and subscribe. There are more stories like this, and your support keeps them coming. And if you're in a place where truth feels heavy and you don't know where to start, remember, prepare, protect, proceed. You don't owe your life to someone who hides behind promises. Tonight, I sleep with my son in his little bed, the rain tapping a softer rhythm on the window. The peace I kept for so long, carefully, patiently, finally came back, not as vindication, but as the small, steady presence of safety. He lost his peace forever. I took mine back, slowly, one honest breath at a time.